body is tied to consciousness in a way that does not require the body if it's going to ascend to another level of density.
Yeah.
So in other words, no, I don't think people are going to be transported into some form of new golden age in their current 3D body into a fourth density or fifth density, that kind of thing. On the other hand, the instantaneous death and transmission into a higher level of consciousness en masse as a result of a giant wave might even create a whole new being, in the sense that there's some suggestion from really ancient records that there's a critical mass of humanity at around 10 billion of us, because that represents an analog, a fractal analog, of the number of cells in an individual brain.
Yes.
And so when there's 10 billion people on the planet, maybe indeed consciousness as a whole alters, because basically we're all sharing consciousness as energetic particles, or not particles, but as standing waves of energy manifesting to our limited minds as particles. We're nonetheless all sharing the same consciousness wave simultaneously. So we're basically all the same critter. And who knows how that critter will tend to manifest if we get enough of us. And it may indeed be that it's this weird kind of a race to get 10 billion humans before the nut jobs want to cut us back down to 500 million kind of a thing.
Well, that's a good point to mention that. And what do you see in terms of, if we maybe tie all of these subjects together? People are talking about potential Earth changes that could potentially be triggered by, just as you suggested, changes in the sun, solar flares, CMEs, etc. The new cycle that the sun is entering into, expected to peak around 2011 to 2013, something like that. And it looks to me, from my perspective, that a lot of governments and so forth are preparing for events, going underground, building seed vaults, etc. Is this something that you see and can see as well in terms of the WebWatch, Clif?
Yes, that's correct. We have it at two different levels. We have the forecast of two solar events, one in early 2012, maybe very late 2011. It's hard for us to differentiate at this stage because of the level of granularity. And then another one in late or early spring of 2013. And it'll be the larger of the two would hit in 2013. They appear, now, I say we have it at two levels. We have that within what we call our Terra entity, where we make forecasts about the Earth changes and so on. And that's where we get our data that references such things as the tsunami. On the other hand, we also have, are able to track that same level of solar influences on the planet for at least two different shots, if you will, from the sun, from the fear language within the powers that be entity. So here we have a forecast from our Terra entity that it will occur, and then subsequent to that, we can find a separate thread of fear language within the powers that be entity that suggests that they're afraid that that will occur. And so this appears to be one of the things that they are attempting to prepare against. Now, there's another component to all of this, and that is the following. That we've got within our Terra entity and within our Space Goat Farts entity, which is where we throw all of our unknown and all the officially denied subject matter like UFO, space aliens, that kind of thing. Within those two entities, we've had a number of years now, we've had this developing thing that we eventually called the Big Squeeze. And it's a linguistic structure that suggests that the sine wave motion of our solar system around the ecliptic edge of the Milky Way, up and down over a 26 to 27,000 year cycle, is potentially going to not continue after 2012. Now, that's not to say that the world is going to end or anything, but there's a suggestion within this Big Squeeze linguistics that something radical is going to occur, and the radical nature of that is that the solar system that we call home will finally bond with the Milky Way. And it turns out that if you look at a lot of the stuff from the European Space Agency and from NASA, you find that the infrared photos suggest that there's some support for this idea, because it turns out that our solar system is not really part of the Milky Way. Really what we're part of is what's known as the Sagittarius Dwarf B galaxy that's been consumed by the Milky Way galaxy for the last 600 million years as they sort of collided, and the Milky Way galaxy is taking off bits and pieces from Sagittarius the way that a carnival fellow will pick up spun candy or cotton candy on a stick in little bits at a time, and it sort of stays in its form.
Yeah.
So here's the issue. The big squeeze says that we're in an area of magnetism that is at the ecliptic of the Milky Way. This would it takes 20 years for our solar system to cross this band of magnetism. The magnetism is larger than is found within our solar system, so it has a tendency to override and crush down all the magnetics that we find within our solar system. And indeed, we see such things as the heliosphere and the heliopause. These giant magnetic bubbles around our solar system are being crushed back down, or they're reduced. There's no official word as to why that reduction occurs, and our scientists think of it as they're weakening. I would prefer to think of it as being overwhelmed by the larger magnetism from outside. In any event, here's the remainder part of the theory. Our data suggests that we're at a bifurcation point, and that in 2012, which is the midway point of this 20-year passage of the ecliptic, we may actually become captured. That would tend to be supported by the Mayans' idea that at the end of the fifth world, there would be no further worlds. In other words, we wouldn't continue this sine wave motion up and down the ecliptic. We would just join the Milky Way galaxy, and things would be different from that point on forever, because we wouldn't be spinning around it. We would be part of it. Now, our data also shows that there's some small possibility that we'll continue on this sine wave journey and not bond with the Milky Way. And that actually turns out to be the one that has the most detailed forecast for Earth changes, because the idea is that as we leave this area of intense magnetism, as everything lets up, releases back to its old way, we're going to get the sort of the dog shaking the water off his back and the fleas are hanging on for dear life kind of effect, as Earth and the sun and everything kind of relaxes from this giant big squeeze. That's where we stand with that view insofar as our data.
Wow, and the latter, what would that mean in terms of if we talk about it in terms of the potential, spiritual and changing effects in human awareness and so forth? If we talk about the latter, do you think that we will we? Well, I guess I can rephrase it and ask like this: do you think that what we're potentially facing here then is two different evolutionary paths to take, so to speak, and this is dependent on whether or not we will be part of the bigger Milky Way galaxy, or if we continue on our own, so to speak? Is that the case here?
That's indeed the case. If we were to continue on our own, there are two separate tracks. There's a known forecasted kind of a pathway. That a lot of that arises from the Vedic and the Tibetan and other long-term traditions, where they speak of the time that we went through the last of these cycles, because they're of the opinion that the passage through the central part of the Milky Way bombards us with energy, whether it's photons or whatever. It doesn't really matter. For a period of time, it does indeed, if you will, boost things here on our solar system in the way of consciousness evolution. And so there will be some of that, albeit temporary. And from their viewpoint, if we continue on in this sine wave journey around the ecliptic, from the period of time of 2012 onward until about 2019 thereabouts, we're going to get into a period of time of increasing earthquakes, CMEs, all kinds of activity on all of the planets as it readjusts to coming out of this magnetism and gains energetic equilibrium. And that might mean a period of weeks or months of daily 7.0 earthquakes where you happen to live. It's going to get extraordinary. It could actually indicate whole continents that would subside, whole continents that would rise up. It would account for such things as the Atlantean legends and all of that. Now, on the other side, if we get trapped in the Milky Way, there are no historical or ancient record prophetical kind of things that suggest what that outcome is likely to be. But given that it would be a more permanent a focus, if you will, of this energetic new material from the center of the galaxy, it might indeed mean a qualifiable and quantifiable change in consciousness for everything. So, but we just, we've never been there before, and there just does not appear to be any speculation about what would occur.
Let's say we have a miss, quote unquote, here then this time around. Do you think that will mean that we'll pass once more around another 26,000 years approximately, and then we get another shot, so to speak, to join into the bigger galaxy, or how do you see the outcome of that?
Well, there's another issue there as well. The 26,000-year cycle is based on our sine wave motion, but the ability to join the galaxy only exists when that sine wave motion coincides with one of the arms from the Milky Way galaxy. In other words, you wouldn't join the galaxy in the gap between the arms. And so the next time that the sine wave motion would tie up in the middle of of another one of these galactic arms would be about, I think, it would be several cycles, so it would be in the order of over 150,000 years from now. And we have to also understand that this particular time, when we're coming down the sine wave arc, so to speak, into the ecliptic here and approaching that midpoint in 2012, we're at the most dense part of the third minor spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy, which is a very fat little arm and very dense at this particular layer that we're coming down through it. The next time that would align like that, as I say, is at least 150,000 years in the future. So it's not going to be the hit or miss business. Gives us a long time to contemplate it.
Indeed, but in any case, whatever happens here, be it one or the other, does this mean huge die-offs on the planet in terms of not only humans but also animals, nature, etc. As well?
Yes, that's pretty much confirmed at the moment. Whether or not humans go as a species is open to speculation at this point. Some significant amount of humans will indeed die off over the next few years as we encounter the planetary stresses that are forcing all of the other species to die off. So far, we're in an extinction event that is as large as the sixth largest extinction event that we've encountered in the past. We may well rise up to the first or second level. We just don't know how bad it's going to be at this stage. But it also coincides with the 62 to 65 million year cycle in the evolutionary fossil record that indicates that these extra energies from space, or unknown energies from space, as we like to call them, indeed are in some way connected directly to the existence of new species. So this is one of those good and bad things, right? Yes. Not necessarily good for humans, but the planet is not at risk, and life is probably not at risk, although the human species may well be at risk.
But there's nothing really we can do about this in terms of considering the forces that we're facing here, so to speak. We're just along for the ride, and all we can do is enjoy it and do the best we can, right? Or is there safe spots on the planet? Is there indeed, does it make sense, as most governments seem to have done, going underground and so forth? Do you see that that's a possible way of saving humans? I
don't buy into that for a number of different reasons. The idea that the way I understand life and relative to the energetic field, and the fact that we're not little atoms whizzing around in space, means that to a certain